Welcome to a special offering by Conversations with a Wounded Healer, the Burnt Out Practice Owner. This series will discuss the current state of group practice ownership, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We'll hear current and former practice owners' tales of glory and woe as we attempt to answer the ultimate question, why do we do this to ourselves? And we want to hear from you too. What have been your biggest moments of struggle or triumph? What are questions you want us to explore? I'm your host, Sarah Bueno. I owned and operated my practice, Head Heart Therapy, for 10 years before selling in 2023. Ownership was an equally grueling and rewarding experience for me, and I now spend my time helping current practice owners find balance for themselves. Join us between releases of Conversations with a Wounded Healer for this special series. Hello, friends. Welcome to the Burnt Out Practice Owner. So excited to have you with me today. We have a very special episode that truly would not have happened if my guest had not reached out and actually shared this topic. So speaking of reaching out, I really do want to hear from you. Today's interview is a perfect example of something that would not have been on my radar had somebody not reached out and said, hey, would you talk about this on the show? And I said, hey, why don't we talk about it together? So reach out to me either via Instagram at headheartbiztherapy or by email at sarah@headheartbiztherapy.com. Another way you can help the podcast, if you like, is give a rate and review either on Apple Podcast if you've got an iPhone, or you can go to ratethispodcast.com/woundedhealer. As many of you know, yes, this little special series is embedded in my longtime podcast, Conversations with a Wounded Healer. To help, you can also share this with a friend. I really do want to make a positive contribution to the world of group practice these days. So please share this with anybody who you think might be interested. And lastly, if you want to help, you can hire me. I work with group practice owners in a variety of business stages. So whether you're in the place of struggling or thriving, I want to help you feel more confident, competent, and balanced in your work. So especially if you're the type of owner who wants to lead with your heart, I'm your gal. Without further ado, let's get to today's guest. So Rachael Sytsma-Ramos is a friend of mine, and she reached out and was like, hey, are you going to talk about the intersection of practice ownership and parenthood? And I said, no, I was absolutely not going to talk about that because A, I have no experience with it, and B, I don't care. Which is kind of true and not true. And Rachael and I sort of get into this in the interview. I am consciously child-free by choice, very happy with my choice, and Rachael's obviously very happy with her choice. And I'm really glad that she brought up this topic because I'm guessing that probably more than not, owners do have kids. And this is something really that does need to be talked about, is how to sort of navigate and juggle everything. So thanks again, Rachael, for bringing this up. So let me introduce you to her specifically. So Rachael Sytsma-Ramos is a clinical psychologist, group practice owner, and mom of two. Her primary clinical specialties are working with queer and transgender, gender-diverse clients, polyamorous ethical non-monogamy relationships, and neurodivergent clients. Sprinkle in women's issues, intimate partner violence, and sexual abuse survivors, and that's her typical clientele. She practices from a feminist-relational lens and is hell-bent on dismantling systems of oppression with her clients. So please enjoy this conversation with Rachael Sytsma-Ramos. Are you a therapist stepping into a leadership role for the first time? Or maybe you've been in a leadership position for a while, but you're bumping up against new struggles. It's a transformative journey and one that can be deeply rewarding, but also filled with unique challenges. Many therapists find themselves in leadership positions because of their exceptional therapeutic skills. Yet leading, supervising, or managing others requires a whole new set of competencies not typically covered in graduate school. Our Authentic Leaders group is here to help you become the authentic and wholehearted leader you aspire to be. And we believe that the journey is best undertaken with the guidance of experienced mentors alongside fellow learners. The next cohort of Authentic Leaders will run November 2024 through June 2025, meeting once monthly on Fridays for 90 minutes. We'll also have some additional opportunities for connection and support along the way. Join me in this journey of self-discovery and leadership mastery. where you'll enhance your leadership skills and forge meaningful connections with fellow therapists committed to their own growth and the betterment of the therapy field. www.headheartbiztherapy.com/authentic-leaders-group. Hello, Rachael Sytsma-Ramos. Welcome to the Burnt Out Practice Owner.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
I'm feeling particularly burnt out, so this is great.
You are particularly burnt out?
Today, yes.
Great. Okay, well, then we'll just dive right in.
Yeah.
Well, why don't you first introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Rachael Sytsma-Ramos. I'm the practice owner for Relational Psychology Group. I've been a group practice since 2021, but private since 2019, so just before shit hit the fan with the pandemic. We are a queer-owned, operated, identified practice working with almost exclusively queer and gender diverse clients in the north side of Chicago.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm. That's us.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. And this is totally unrelated to the topic, but I want to ask this anyway.
Sure.
Since you went from being in a group practice to then owning your own group practice, because every group practice owner wants to hear this, what do you know now as a group practice owner that before you were like, I can't believe so-and-so would do things this way, but now that you're a practice owner, you're like, oh my God, this is what they were right.
Well, so when I left the group, I left because I was pregnant, which is going to fold into what we were talking about today.
Yeah.
And I was like, I just need to be able to control like my schedule and like the flow of clients and all of that in a way that I didn't feel like I had, which I had been in a couple groups before starting my own, right? So,
oh, really? Okay.
And I've been in an experience before. And that the last group I was in, that practice owner just sort of was doing some like adjustments to the way she was running her business, which I think are fine adjustments. They just did not align with the way that I wanted to do things for my own like individual practice. And so I was like, I just got to have, like, I'm about to enter a part of my life where I'm going to be like fully out of control. Like this is a thing I needed more control over, right? So that being said, I think what I have learned now is just like the amount of time being a group practice owner takes versus like a solo practice owner. It was so much easier. Like it was so much easier.
I know. No one ever listens. No one listens when we say that, but it's fucking true.
I had an idea, right? Like I had an idea, but like to fully be in it now, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm constantly needed like all the time. And you're not that needed when you're in solo. I mean, you're needed by your clients, like, you know, your own personal stuff, if, you know, your family or whatever that you partners, friends, all that stuff. But like, it's a whole different beast when it's also like your clinicians and your clients and your family and your friends and yourself. Right. Like it's a lot. So the time, I think it's the biggest thing.
Yeah. So anyone out there listening who thinks they want to start a group practice, listen to this part because it is so true. And you don't know the weight of what that feels like until you step into it. Because like you said, you had a conception of the time, but for me, I think it's the weight of carrying all of it.
Yeah. Like I knew, you know, I could extrapolate if I'm contacting my supervisor X amount of times per week for this, you know, whatever, just like here and there outside of supervision or whatever it was, like, and she had 10 employees, let's say, like, right, we could kind of like do that math, but like you're saying, the weight of it is a lot heavier if you're holding all that all the time and trying to do your own clinical work. And it's just a lot. Right. There are definitely days where I'm like, I just wish I wasn't needed by anyone, like in this moment. Like, I just need to be like a lone wolf right here.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess one other thing that you and I had talked offline about just mentioning, because we're in the world in the midst of awful humanitarian crises left and right. And it's been impacting the therapist community in Chicago in a really nasty way. Yeah. And that's not what we're going to talk about here because that's not necessarily part of what we're doing. But we wanted to be able to say that like you and I talked very deeply about like how we're impacted and by like how we feel about everything and what we're noticing outside. And so anything you want to share around that?
Yeah, I guess lately it's been feeling hard to get appropriate support, like as a therapist. I don't know if you're mutually feeling that way too, but like kind of knowing where to turn, or like everyone feels so burnt out, right? Everyone feels so depleted in a lot of ways. And if they're not depleted, I think they're the folks who I've encountered who are kind of like, what do you mean something's going on in the world I don't know about? Like they're a little, a little more absent. And so that also doesn't feel good. And so I think that's been a particular challenge over the last like 6 months, is feeling like I know where to go to get support in particular ways. Not always, but definitely, it's definitely harder. I'll say that. It feels harder. Yeah. It feels like everyone's sort of stretched and doesn't have a spoon to give. And I get that too. But yeah, it's been tough.
Yeah. I don't think we've recovered from the pandemic. I think the world pretended that it did. And especially therapists, my hypothesis is because when the pandemic happened, we worked harder, I think, than we had right before. And so we haven't gotten a fucking break.
No, I was just talking to, we have a postdoc on staff, and she did all her training during the pandemic, right? So she, like most of her education, and as in terms of graduate school education and training, was during the pandemic. And we were just sort of musing about how different that must have been for her. Like, this is her norm. Whereas me and the other clinicians on our staff are, we had graduate training and work experience before that. We're like, we are exhausted. Like, we feel so tired because we haven't had like summer vacation lulls, like in the way that we typically did pre-pandemic, or the holiday lulls that we normally get toward the end of every year, where people are just too busy or out of town or whatever. And it's like, we're still on like 52 weeks of the year, essentially, unless we're being diligent and taking that time for ourselves. And I'm sure many are struggling with doing that because, our clients are in need. We are also in need of money. Like, we're in need of stability. And sometimes that feels stable. And I'll say, as a practice owner, that's an area I super struggle with too, because I'm still seeing a full caseload of folks, and I'm trying to generate money for the practice and to keep things.
Wait, how many? My eyes just popped out of my head. What?
Like about 22 to 24 people a week. Yeah.
Just closed my jaw. Okay. I'm not going to unpack that with you. You know what you're doing there.
The problem is, I'll say, like, the vast majority of those people I've been seeing for like 6 years, so it's like, these are people I've been seeing or more. There's people I've been seeing for a long time. And so, like, I'm not going to be like, I need a fucking break, gotta go. That's not gonna happen. And there's a particular challenge in finding like queer and gender diverse, like competent clinicians out there. And so I feel like we get a ton of referrals. It's like, it's hard to turn folks away. So anyway, I know, it's not the best. It's not the best model, but to your point, that makes it harder to be like, I can actually take this breath, I can take a break, I can do a week vacation or whatever, because I feel very responsible for making sure the finances are flowing within our practice. And part of that is me having a full caseload right now. So it just gets challenging, in that sense.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of being needed and burnt out all the time, the thing that you reached out to me about wanting to talk about that had not crossed my mind, because I am child-free by choice, is parenting and practice owning.
Yeah. Parenting and practice. It's like two kinds of parenting.
Right? So hit me with it.
Yeah. I think most of the practice owners that I personally know are child-free by choice, which I like totally love and respect. And the parents that I do know who are practice owners tend to be divorced parents. And so they have sort of split time, with their kids. And so the flow of that might look a bit different, where they're like, their days off are the days they have with their kids. And then they're working on the days they don't have their kids, or doing more clinical work on those days, I'll say. And so I was just sort of reflecting. I have 2 young kids too. So this is probably different than some of the other practice owners with kids who are like, maybe they're in their, they obviously started at some point when they were little kids, but, maybe they're in their late teens or like going off to college or whatever. So it feels a little different versus having, 2 under 5 and then trying to like get this group thing going and up and running and creating some more stability for for me, for when my kids are older and are going to have more, maybe extracurriculars or like needing more direct involvement in school stuff. Like I want to be able to be there. And that's sort of why I wanted my group, to sort of flourish and stabilize, hopefully in this stage of their lives.
Stabilize.
Whatever that means. Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm not laughing at you, but these are like, I want to like make that so clear to listeners that like, that's the dream, right? Is that we can
Right.
stabilize. And I'm not trying to poop all over your parade, Rachel, for real. And be realistic about, there were so few times where I felt like things were stable. Like as soon as something stabilized, somebody was pregnant or somebody was going to leave and start their own practice, or there's some sort of issue I got to deal with. It's just like human beings are anything but stable.
Right. And like, that is something so we can get into that too, but like, I was like, when I started this practice, I was like, when I started it as a group, I should say, when I was like, I'm going to hire people on, I was like, people aren't staying here. Like, that's not the goal. Like,
right.
I think people join groups to learn how to do a practice, right? Like how they want to do it, how they don't want to do it, what they think they can do better. All of that stuff happens in those environments. And I don't plan on my employees staying long term. Like I'm always like, yeah, this is like a stepping stone to their own venture, right? And there are definitely times where I'm like, if everyone left today, like that would suck. But if everyone left today, it also might be a lot easier for me to stabilize because like I can count on myself. You know what I mean? Like I know myself and I know like what I was pulling as a solo practitioner. And so I know I have that like at the very end of the day, right? Like it'll always like fall back on me. But anyway, when I saw you creating this podcast, I was like, this is such I think a unique to parents who are practice owners dilemma is that piece of like, we're needed constantly for all these things, right? So like a perfect example, right? As a practice owner, like I'm sure you were the person people called like, oh shit, I think my client needs a higher level of care. Or like this thing came up in session, like I need to run this by my supervisor, right? That's me. So all my clients know I'm a supervisor. And so they know sometimes I'm going to have to like, I'm so sorry. Someone is calling me. I need to see if this is an emergency or not, right? They also know I'm a parent. And so they will get that interruption sometimes too, when it's like, I'm sorry, my kid's school is calling and I have no idea why. I need to pick up because they usually only call if it's like,
something's
there's
bad.
some blood. Yeah, there's some blood. There's some,
vomit.
Like vomit, diarrhea. Like we got to get this kid out of here kind of thing. So I'm so grateful to have these like very long-term understanding clients. I mean, they've seen me pregnant. They've been actually with me when I had a pregnancy loss. Like they've had, a lot of history with me in terms of like seeing me grow as a clinician, seeing me grow as an owner, seeing me grow as a parent, right? And so for that, I'm super grateful and forever grateful to like their patience and understanding as well. But it's such a unique position where 8:30 to 5, I'm here at this desk or in this office, right? Seeing people, attending to the needs of the practice, attending to, my clinicians' needs, giving them supervision, all that stuff. And then from 5 until 9, when I'm like at home with my kids, I'm fully on with them, doing life, doing kid things, doing, prepping for the next day of school, reaching out to all these, different therapists, teachers, et cetera, for my kids. And then that leaves me like an hour at the end of the day for myself. And then the weekends, childless folks just, you get that weekend. Parents don't get that weekend, right? That's the time when we're doing things with our families or like doing our chores, doing our stuff, And so I had this moment this past year where it was just like, I'm never not on, right? Yeah. So it feels like I'm never not on. Part of me loves that in a way. Like I love helping people. I love fostering growth. Why I wanted to start a group practice in the first place. I wanted to create community where we could all grow together. And we had these like through lines of like the clients that we're passionate about seeing and the identities that we all share that really form the way that we are therapists. That part felt super important to me. And I still love that. But then it's like, damn, like I cannot address this like thing with Change Healthcare right now. Like, I cannot deal with like, you know, I don't know, just like some random bullshit from the day that you had, you know, compared to like my kid is screaming in my ear crying because they just can't fall asleep or whatever, right? So it's just like the juggling of all those balls, the juggling of that time, and then feeling like, oh, so I get this like 1 hour essentially to like binge my candy, watch some TV, and call it a day. It's not like I love my life as a whole, but it's at the same time, it's like, well, I made these choices that lead to me being on all the time. And I don't know that I would have made those same choices had I known what that actually like looked and felt like, you know?
I'm really glad that you said that because that was my feeling. And like, I'm not going to blame anybody. Like, if you want to have kids, you want to have kids for a really wholehearted reason. If you want to have a practice,
Right.
you want to have a practice to do beautiful things in the world. And
Right.
and I'm glad that you like are like I did this to myself because
Yeah.
I mean, I guess like what advice would you give to someone who is contemplating either maybe they're a young practice owner, like young in the practice, however many years, or maybe they're a parent of young children and they're thinking about a group practice. Like, what would you tell former Rachel?
I don't know. Because part of me is like, these steps happened the way they happened for a reason, is sort of my belief structure, right? Is that like, when I hired my first employee, it felt very like serendipitous and like the timing was right and the situation felt right. And I do not regret that choice at all. Nor do I regret employee 2, 3, 4, and 5, right? Like I don't regret having those experiences, or like some of them were sort of made out of necessity too, right? Like one I hired because I was like, I'm about to go on parental leave. And I didn't take a long parental leave, but it was like, I need to make sure like the office lights can stay on. And if I'm not seeing clients, like what's, you know, where's that money coming from? So it was a decision to sort of help support the business and myself, you know, and that clinician. But I think what I would tell former Rachel, what I would tell younger me would be, you have to expect that it is going to be harder than you think. You don't know all the things that are going to come down the pike, right? And that you have to be prepared to like roll with that and feel depleted. Like I feel fulfilled, but I also feel depleted at the same time. And that is something I don't think I experienced in quite this way. Like grad school was kind of similar to that, but not, it was wholly different in that like ratio, if that makes sense.
Well, and I'm guessing that it's like you feel fulfilled in like your heart and depleted maybe in your energy.
Yes and no, because sometimes this is really energy giving to me. Like seeing my clients does that for me a lot, but also like seeing like a clinician have a high or like have a success, or, you know, like a benchmark has been met for them in a way that feels really good. You know, like you get those little like, oh yeah, this marker has been met. Like I am a real business owner now. This is really happening in a way that feels grown up or like official. And you get that same kind of thing with parenting too, right? Like you get this like, oh, like I no longer am reacting these ways that I did before, or I'm no longer worried about these things anymore the same way that I was when the kids were younger, or when I only had one of the kids, or, you know, whatever. And that's also really energy giving too. But yeah, like I will say, like at the end of the day, like I'm so ready to hit my pillow in a way that I didn't experience prior to having kids or being a group practice owner.
Right. Yeah. And I can relate to the self-imposed, like the way that I would describe it when I was like probably peak burnout was that if everything went according to plan, I would just be scraping by okay. But then as soon as something out of left field would happen, I would be a fucking mess and something would go by the wayside. And it wasn't kids for me, but I unfortunately did not just do practice owning. I did a podcast and I'm teaching and all this other stuff, right? And so those were my children. And so something was always suffering for me.
Yeah.
And I always felt like I'm not giving what my employees probably deserve attention-wise because my attention is so divided.
Yeah, because it has to be.
Right.
That's the thing that I think I struggle with because I want to be right, supportive and available. And I think for the most part, I don't know, you can ask my employees. I think I am. But I'm also very clear with them that like from 5 to 9, it's going to be a lot harder to get support from me, if at all, because that's when I'm like hands-on mom, right? Like I am hands-on parenting. I'm doing all the things. I have a partner and a very supportive partner, but like their work schedule doesn't allow for them to get home until 7. So it's like, yeah, I got to do all the like harder shit at the end of the day by myself with 2 little ones. So I think that level of transparency though has been super helpful for my folks. Like they get it and they know, yeah, text you, call you, email you, whatever in that window, and you can respond when you can respond. And I do. I think it's real easy for me to want to like jump on that and do that in the moment, even when I'm hands-on momming, right? Even though I'm like, I've got like dinner on the on the stove and a kid screaming over here and another kid asking for an orange and like this phone is beeping at me and I have to like divvy that up. At the end of the day, like I know I have to divide that attention. And so I really do try to be very intentional about like my time with my kids is my time with my kids. Like I'm not going to be responding right to those things because I only have so little time with them because I'm a practice owner, because I'm doing this like this big schedule,
Mm-hmm. Well, what I'm sort of taking away from this is being able to set boundaries in this role is crucial to survival.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I left the practice I was at to have my baby and then started my practice when I was like coming back from parental leave. So I didn't have my own practice without having a kid,
Mm-hmm.
And so if I hadn't, and I had, I had my boundary set there. Like the whole point of me doing this was like, I wanted to be able to put my kid to bed. And that wasn't a schedule option available to me at the previous practice, right? So I was like, I'm going to do this so that I can have the things that felt really important to me in my parenting life. Same thing is true now. Like the schedule is what the schedule is. I have to be there for my kids at night. I have to do drop off in the morning when they're in, real school, public school, and they're done at 3:30. I'm going to have to adjust accordingly to that too.
Mm-hmm.
Just point being is right. Like, yeah, being able to establish like what feels like a bigger priority for me and holding that boundary firm because of that. Right. So I don't want my kids to feel like they're second. I don't want them to feel like mom prioritizes her work over me.
And they might anyway.
But
Yeah.
I'm trying so hard to establish this now that like when I'm with you, I'm with you.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and not to say that I get on my phone. I watch a TikTok. Like, right.
Yeah.
I do with, I do some stuff. I definitely put TV on. Like it definitely happens where it's like, I need a little moment too, but trying really hard to just hold the boundaries so that like, my clients know, my clinicians know. I hope at the end of the day, my kids will know too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I wonder, because what would always come up for me was judging myself for not meeting the standard that I had set for myself for what I expected. And I'm curious how much you fall into that too, whether it's, with your clinicians, with your kids. Like, does that come up where you're judging yourself?
For me, it's weird, but I think it comes out more in judging my appearance. Like I have gotten way lax and casual and lazy, I would say.
In quotes.
In terms of like, in quotes, how I show up. Not like I'm present. I'm engaged. I'm present. I'm still like showing up clinically in a way that feels good. I think I'm still showing up in a way with like my friends, my family, all my relationships in a way that feels good. I just don't think I look the best. That's what I'll say. Like currently I'm wearing sweatpants and Uggs, like maybe I could have made a different choice. I don't know. That's where I feel like I actually get harder on myself. It is more about like, am I showing up in a way that like performs professional, which is actually not something I truly like ascribe to. Like I don't like this ideal of like professionalism being a specific sort of standard in terms of like dress or appearance, but it is. I mean, like people are still judging you based on that.
Yeah.
I think a benefit of our particular clientele is that clothing and expression is so important and can be so outside the box that I don't think our clients are necessarily expecting a clinician in like slacks and heels or something. And so when I have like my like baggy ripped jeans and like Doc Martens, are like, sweet, we're good to go here. Or like,
oh yeah,
my graphic t-shirts or whatever, it's fine. But I think if I showed up at a conference that way, right, like people would be like, who the hell is this psychologist like showing up like this? So it's something that like, for me, it's the thing that had to go, right? Like you're saying, like
something's got to give.
Like, something's got to give. And for me, it's that. And, you know, sort of like the cleanliness of my home might also be one of the things where it's like, you know, before I had kids and like had my own domain, it was like very clean and tidy and like aesthetically cute. And now it's not. And, but it's also, like I saw a quote that was like, yeah, but this is someone else's childhood. And I'm like, yeah, that's what is in my home. It's two little people's childhood happening. And like, that is loud and bright and full of toys and crafts and messes here and there. Right. But it's like, it's the happiness at the end. Like at the end of the day, like I look at all that stuff and I'm like, happiness happened here.
Yeah.
Play happened here. Imagination happened here. And so that feels better than to just be like, oh my God, I haven't like kept my home clean or my appearance a certain way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. Totally. I'm curious because, you know, the whole time I've been a practice owner, I've sort of thought of the analogy of parenthood and practice ownership. And, you know, obviously it's not quite like that because, you know, the employees that you have are adults.
Yeah.
But I'm curious. Well, actually two right? Thank you. So two questions. First one is, what's harder, being a parent or being a manager?
Great question. I think being a parent is harder.
Oh,
I think
okay.
being a parent is harder. If I'm the worst boss my employees have, I think that's okay, right? Like I think they can find another boss. They can become their own boss, right? If I am a bad parent, like my kids will not be able to find a good parent, right? Like I think the stakes are so much higher and the pressure feels higher because of that. And I can effectively close this laptop, walk out this door, go home and compartmentalize and leave this behind. I can't do that with the kids, right? Like, so like I said, school's calling. I'm constantly thinking about, I got to schedule that ENT appointment or like, well, should they be in swim lessons or, you know, like stuff like that. They got to get the next size clothes, like for the next season. Like it's like constant churning in my head. And not to say that practice ownership doesn't have some of that, but like I can shut it off more easily when I need to, right? I can think about that tomorrow, or I can jot some notes about that tomorrow, or I can talk to so-and-so about that on Thursday. Like with the kids stuff, it's like, it's all on the parents, right? And again, like I have a supportive, wonderful partner who's there and does this stuff too, but it's like, it doesn't make your brain stop doing it, even if you know you have that other person. So I think parenting's harder.
Okay. All right. And then last question then, what has parenting taught you about business ownership that you may not have like learned if you weren't a parent?
Probably the biggest one would be the patience that you learn. Like having to be so patient with very irrational humans, you know, developing.
Talking about your kids, right?
And my employees sometimes, but no, right? Like with the kids, you have to develop that skill to be able to like literally have a meltdown happen and be like the calm one, regulate your own emotions, and you know, like not to say that we don't have moments, right? But like to show up in a very calm and grounded way. I think that has been the most helpful tool for me as an owner, because like if some shit's flying at me, someone's doing some bullshit, some shit's happening over here that's out of our control and it's impacting everyone, whatever it is, I think I've developed a really good skill set being able to be like, okay, hold on. like in this moment, what's going to be helpful? Like, let's just get grounded. Let's, let's listen to like, right. Like to actually hear versus to respond and, try to work with whatever's flying at you pretty quickly, but in a calmer manner. And I think if I hadn't been a parent there, I'd be freaking the fuck out about the like change healthcare hacks and like all the stuff that we're talking about, like within the therapist community in Chicago right now, or like a clinician deciding to leave or, whatever would throw me for a much bigger loop than it does, I think now, because I'm like, yeah, every day is different for me and my other, in my personal life and my parenting life. You cannot expect, Friday to look the same as Thursday. So I'm just so used to that it's true over here too.
Well, and I'll just say, to give you credit, not all parents learn that. So this is a choice, right? This is a choice that you made, I'm guessing, because you wanted to parent in a way that, supported your kids,
differently.
Right? It all comes from our own trauma, right? We all know that already. Yeah. So just want to give you that you made that choice.
I did very consciously made that choice and very consciously make that choice daily. Right. And I do, it's the same here for the ownership piece too. Like I very consciously made choices as an owner to show up in a way that I think is maybe different, but also like healthier for me and hopefully my employees and my business as a whole, but just like to not get so rattled so quickly. I think it's cool.
Yeah. Well, any other final things that you want parents who are also practice owners to hear?
Just find some fucking time for yourself. Like, get that.
Says the woman who has 1 hour.
But I will say this, right? So I will take weekends by myself, right? Like I will go like, peace out family. I'm going to the UP and like, backpacking by myself, or like I get a cabin in the woods, or I, do something. You need it. Even if like everything is so chill, so smooth, it never is. But even if it was, like take that time. Like you deserve it. You are doing more unpaid work than you realize. And if you added that all up, like treat yourself to the fucking whatever, day away, weekend away, take a vacation, take some time, do some things.
You hear that, parents? Do it.
Just do it. Even if I don't do it.
Do what Rachael says, not what Rachael does.
No, I do. Yeah. Don't let it be a weekend a year. Like let it be.
Yeah. More. And and I hope you can't, like, I hope you listen back to this, and I hope
I will.
you hear, I hope you hear what you need to hear, right? Because when we're like, and I have been in burnout for different reasons, and I just, I want you to give yourself the gift that you're giving to the audience right now.
Yeah, because like you're right. When you're in the burnout, you're just so close to it. You just can't. You're just like, I just have to get through this. But take some time.
Yeah. Well, where can people find you?
Relational Psychology Group on Instagram and Facebook, and our website, www.relationalpsychologygroup.com.
Amazing. Well, thank you. Thank you for being here and illuminating a topic that I literally never would have chosen myself. So well done. Well done.
Thanks for entertaining my thoughts.
Anytime. Thanks for listening to the special Burnt Out Practice Owner series. If you want more information about today's guest, go to our website at www.headheartbiztherapy.com/podcast. Thanks to the Creative Imposter Studios for editing, and I'm your host, Sarah Bueno. Until next time, bye-bye.